Welcome to Always Listening. We're your hosts. I'm Joel.
I'm Jay, number one dad. I'm holding the custom-made wooden coaster that says so right here. Nobody else has this. It's custom-made. You can all claim you're the number one dad, but I have the proof right there.
So, that's impressive, Jay. And we are always listening, by the way. But it is not as cool as I got a bunch of awesome things for Father's Day. Here's my favorite one, though. My youngest daughter, Nola, made me a card that said, "Dear Dad, I'm so sorry for all the times I peed in your bed." Love, Nola.
Now, see, my niece tried to challenge my number one dad status. And I said, no. She's like, look, my dad right there. He's got the card that says best dad. I was like, no. He is the best dad. He's not the number one dad. That's me. And then my sister-in-law said, look at my father's mug. It says number one dad. He's had that for years. He's had that before you were even born. Or probably you were like 2 years old. And I was like, that's a mug that was mass produced, sent everywhere, not custom made with love. No.
Also, it's outdated, right? I mean, he might have been the number one dad at the time, but like times they are a-changing.
I have taken over. So right here, Jay Soderberg, number one dad. All you other dads, you can come for it. You ain't getting it.
To be the man, you gotta beat the man. Woo!
Woo!
Jay, we've got a really interesting news story that I was surprised by when you first brought it up to me earlier, and then as we began to sort of talk about it a little bit, it got even more interesting. The headline, and you can find the full article in the show notes, but the headline is from Rain News. Libsyn shareholder complains of executive compensation and calls for a new board. You were talking about this when we first got connected this morning, and you were on and the Libsyn situation and the shareholders, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I totally overlooked it. It has not been widely reported. This article came out on the 13th, so not quite a week ago now. We learned from Podnews that Libsyn, one of the largest and most established podcasting hosting companies, is undergoing tumult. One of its beneficial owners, the 6% shareholder group KMAC. So this is a mutual fund, basically. They own 6% of Libsyn. They are calling for a special stockholder meeting to revise or replace the board of directors. The dissatisfaction appears to center around executive compensation. And you and I went back and forth a little bit about the reasons, but here is their argument. They say that the CEO, Christopher Spencer, and the CFO, John Busshouse, have been paid too much, basically. Not their salaries and bonuses are not commensurate with the amount of revenue and particularly the profit that Libsyn is taking in. They said that the CEO made $400,000 in salary, $800,000 in bonus this year, and Busshouse made $350,000 in salary and $700,000 in bonus. And the KMAC filing states that total adds up to 59% of Libsyn's income. Now, what is not clear based on their filing is are they referencing profit or revenue? Seems to indicate profit. Income is a strange word there. I wish they had said profit or revenue, but I believe they mean the top line profit. What after the expenses, what is Libsyn making? And they're saying that almost 60% of it is going to these two executives. That's a big chunk, Jay.
That's what it sounds like. Now, this was a story that you mentioned was in our show notes for quite some time for us to sort of get to at some point. This is actually reported, I think even maybe months ago in Podnews, that this was happening. And then it was re-reported here just last week. I didn't bring it up because I've had some experience in this regard when I was at ESPN and Roy Disney was on the board of directors, and he also tried to stage a coup. Roy Disney tried twice, once with Eisner and then another time with Bob Iger to sort of redo the board of directors and change the direction of the Disney company. Both times failed. Because essentially the brother of the founder of the company could not garner enough shareholders to be on his side. That's what it all comes down to. And when I hear that a 6% shareholder, who's not even a person, it's a group of people, is looking to try and do the same thing with Libsyn, these things most likely usually fail, which is why they're actually usually never reported on in the first place, because it's something that I'm sure if you were to talk to Rob Walsh, he'd probably say, well, it's nothing. They're going to fail. It's not going to be any big deal. But essentially, it's something to remember that Libsyn is a publicly traded company. All of their information is available publicly through the SEC. You can go online and find exactly what their revenue is. And we reported on Q1 revenue on this particular podcast when revenue earnings were being announced. So this isn't something that is a big secret. It can't be held a big secret because it's a publicly traded company. I brought this up because we recently had another acquisition occur in the podcasting space. Triton Digital has acquired Omny. Omny is an Australian company. Why is that a big deal? Well, Triton Digital is a very trusted ad service group to big broadcasters in the United States. Omny is the one hosting company that a lot of big broadcasters are trusting because Jacobs Media, who is the biggest and most trusted consultants in the broadcasting industry, have been pushing all of their clients to go and use the Omny product. Just to give you a list of who is using Omny from the big broadcasting side of things: Cumulus Media, which is part of Westwood One, Entercom, MediaCore, Southern Cross Austereo, which is essentially all of Australia, Chorus Entertainment, which is essentially all of Canada, Mashable, Arabian Radio Network, and Mamma Mia. I don't know who Mamma Mia is or how they ended up on this list of big broadcasters, but congratulations, Mamma Mia. You got another mention on another news outlet, if you want to call us news. Have we decided, are we news? Is that what we're going with? So I bring this up because the widening of big broadcasters and I'll just say independent podcasters. I won't say small podcasters. Independent podcasters and big broadcasters is widening even further and quicker than I think we even realize. Like, it's the money that is being poured into this industry is happening, but it ain't trickling down to the independent podcasters.
Mamma Mia, by the way, here's a little hot take follow-up for you. Australia's largest independent women's media group. That's what it is. They're a website. They were founded in 2007, opinion and lifestyle website. But now you can read, listen, watch, and start the conversation on news, entertainment, opinion, kids, style, TV, and more. So that's their claim to fame. 1.3 million likes on Facebook. Yeah, so here's the thing. I tend to agree with you, and I tend to think of Libsyn as a very well-run company. And yet, if you look at the moves that are being made in the space as a whole, and if the drumbeat from the board is we're moving steadily and slowly, and our plan was already a good one. We don't need to shift gears based on what the rest of the industry is doing. That would be fine, except, again, I feel like the combination of the sort of conservative nature of Libsyn's game plan and the large amount of money that's going to those two guys, I could see why this argument could win a lot of folks in the room. It'll be interesting to see what the success is and what the results of it are.
Omny hasn't been around for that long either. And think about how long Anchor hasn't been along for that long, and they were purchased for what some would say is probably an overprice by Spotify.
Well, and it was interesting to me at the time, and we talked about it on the show even, the valuation of Anchor as the tech stack compared to the valuation of Gimlet as the creative stack, so to speak, and it was completely outsized. Gimlet was more than double or almost double what Anchor was worth in their estimation there. But still, I don't know. Libsyn is like, we talk about Apple a lot as a slumbering giant, in that if they would just get activated, for good or ill, lots of different things would change in the industry and the medium. I would say the same thing about Libsyn. I do feel like in many ways, look how long it took them to redesign their back end for stats. That had been a complaint for years and years and years, as basically every other media hosting company had a much more pleasant UI for the interaction of your stats, for your show statistics. Libsyn finally overhauled that, and it looks quite nice now. Same thing with their media player, their embedded player. There was a lot of stagnation there for a long time. Finally, that's been corrected. But Jay, you brought something up to me that I didn't even realize. They own a website media hosting company.
Yeah.
Libsyn does. Mm-hmm. They own a company called Pair. So if I'm shopping with Libsyn and I'm hosting my media there and I want a broader package of services, whereas my clients, for instance, if they need web hosting, a lot of times I'll push them towards Blueberry because of their tight integration with WordPress. You're telling me that Libsyn's got tight integration with a company that they own, and yet I didn't know that. It's not anywhere on their website. Why not push forward and tell podcasters about the different services that you offer? We're supposed to get this amazing new ad platform from Libsyn this year. That's, we assume, the reason why they brought on Rob Greenlee in many reasons, and in many ways. And yet, why did it take so long? Blog Talk Radio was doing it 6 years ago, and Spreaker has adopted that technology and has been doing it well for a couple of years now. Blueberry has some ad options, Acasts of the world, the Audio Booms of the world. All these smaller players were able to do it, nimbly move in that direction. Again, Libsyn doesn't have to push all of their user base into it. It's not like you got to rock the boat, but just offer it. Put it on your website. Say, hey, have you ever thought about ads? Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about web hosting?
If Libsyn, and we'll even bring up Blueberry, are going to be the flag planters of the independent podcasters, they have to start working faster to take care of the independent podcasters, or podcasting will lose. The independent podcasters will lose to big broadcaster, and podcasting as we know it is going to change. We've mentioned numerous times, Apple has not made a cent directly from podcasting. Google has yet to make a cent directly from podcasting. Spotify has kind of yet to make a cent directly from podcasting, but they've got plans, and they've already started to unleash some of those plans. It was just recently announced that they are allowing big sponsors to start targeting podcast listeners, except that's only going to be for the big corporate sponsors. It's not going to be for the little guy. You're not going to be able to jump into the Spotify marketplace and purchase ads for your podcast. No. That's not going to happen. And this is going to be one of those things that we've talked about before, where the dichotomy is going to be big podcasters are going to be on this app. Independent podcasters may only be on this app. And which app is going to end up winning out when it comes to reaching that mainstream audience that's not listening to podcasting yet?
Interesting times. I don't think, and we've said this before, we'll say it again, I do not think the independent podcaster is in any danger. You just need to be nimble. You need to keep your head on a swivel, so to speak, and be willing to roll with the punches and adjust with the times. I do think that Libsyn or Blueberry or whoever stands in their wake in years to come will be there to serve the independent podcaster. I do think that it's likely that the idea of being able to just host a show that you like and pay for it directly and not put any ads in it and whatever, I think that's still going to be available. The question is, will the directories change over time as this ad solution continues to be adopted by the larger companies, as more of these companies decide exactly what their particular plan is? Do the directories stratify not only in the back end of the industry, but the actual presentation to listeners? That's, I think, the worry for some podcasters.
Well, I will just add about that Libsyn. I agree with you if they stay the course that they're currently on. However, if we play the what if Marvel's What If decided to do an episode and KMAC succeeds, I don't think that would be the same. And if you look at where the revenues are coming from, specifically with Libsyn, it's from host subscriptions. It's not from advertising, and it's not from podcast websites. It's from host subscriptions. So if you're making a majority of your money from that, and the biggest players in the business are the big broadcasters, and you're not bringing in the big broadcasters because now they're all going over to the Triton service on Omny, That's where things start to get dicey for the independent podcaster. Again, nothing to be worried about. Todd Cochran has now moved to the mainland. And that's obviously to focus more on the business side of things. So there's still at least one other person out there who's trumpeting the little guy. But at the same time, money will talk. And if Todd were given the right amount of money, he said it I'm not speaking out of turn. I'm not Todd Cochran. I'm not speaking for Todd Cochran, but Todd Cochran has said if the money was right, he would gladly listen to any sort of offer, but the money's got to be right. And now that he's got an Anchor and an Omny to compare to, his number is going to be, I can tell you right now, will be way higher than what those two companies have received.
I feel like it goes up literally every day. I feel like he wakes up in the morning, pours a hot cup of coffee, checks the headlines, and goes, yeah, let me bump that up a couple of zeros there. It's a good time to own a hosting company. It is absolutely a good time to own a hosting company. It will be interesting to see how it shakes out. I do absolutely think there are a lot of players in the space, a lot of smaller, nimble players, and so again, they see the success and the continued steady business of a company like Libsyn, of Blueberry. So even if those companies go away, even if this complete stratification that we're sort of discussing happens, someone will enter the space to fill that niche. The independent podcaster will be taken care of. Do not worry about that. If that's what you want, you can continue to do it. What's interesting to me is, as we talk a lot about bringing in that next million listeners or next 100 million listeners, same thing. The next 100,000 podcasters that start podcasting for the first time, I think many of them will be pushed over the hump of actually taking the dive and beginning the creative process because of the more steady on-ramp to potential monetization that comes through this change in our industry. Like if you look at it, it is a little bit the YouTubeization of podcasting, right? It looks like we're going to end up having maybe 3 or 4 different marketplaces instead of the one website and one service as we have with YouTube for video. Maybe we'll have a Spotify and an Apple and whoever, maybe a Pandora or something as the big directories that people are using, and then a bunch of independents that fill out that big circle. And your podcast can go anywhere in there. And no matter what your desire is on that show, to spend a little money and make it a hobby, to make a little money and make it a hobby that doesn't cost you anything, those options will be there for you depending upon what company you want to go with and which, approach you want to take to your show. I see options, not dead ends, I guess is what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
It's just something to be aware of is our point here, I guess. Like, I had not even noticed this story. You had kept your eye on it, but sort of thought it was nothing. But as you put all the pieces together, I don't know, maybe it's a little something. Let's watch and see what happens. And again, KMAC doesn't have to be successful in the takeover, I don't think, to affect the direction of Libsyn. Right? Like also you could win over shareholders and change the direction of the board of directors without actually changing the makeup of the board of directors.
Also true.
Why don't we move to this podcast business journal? Where are consumers listening to podcasts, Jay?
Yeah, so this was a story that a lot of the podcast newsletters have put out. We are using the Podcast Business Journal link here, which says, according to the ratings firm Nielsen, Washington, D.C. is the number one market for podcast listening. Nielsen's Audio's portable people meter, which, if you don't know, is a little device that looks a little bit like a cell phone. I don't know if they've changed it these days, if it's smaller or not. I know that was a big problem in the early days of the portable people meter, is that people thought it was just too big. But it collected data in the 48 largest radio markets. If you don't know what the list of the markets are, you can go and Google it, but I can tell you New York and LA are 1 and 2 in terms of market size. They are the largest markets that are out there. According to Nielsen's portable people meter, percent total of people on this panel, 6+ who have ever listened to a podcast, say that the number one place listening to podcasts is Washington, D.C., followed by Seattle, Tacoma in number 2, Salt Lake City at number 3, Portland, Oregon at number 4, Minneapolis, St. Paul at number 5. I hope you're getting where I'm going with this. Raleigh, Durham at number 6, Austin at number 7, Nashville at number 8, Middlesex, Somerset, Union, which is New Jersey, number 9, and San Jose at number 10. Nowhere on that list is New York, which is essentially the capital of podcasting, and LA, the capital of comedy podcasting.
So the two things that I'll say real quick there. At first I was startled too, but read it again. It's percentage of listeners, right? The percentage of people tested here that say they've ever listened to a podcast. It's not raw numbers. If you just looked at the raw numbers, how many people have ever listened to a podcast out of these Nielsen things? I bet New York and LA would be at least in the top 5, if not 1 and 2, just because of the sheer size of those markets. But this is about the percentage of the market that's into podcasting. And for that, I think DC makes total sense. If you think about the DC metro area, the kinds of industries that are there, the combination of government, of course, being the primary employer, but then all of the large tech industries and businesses that feed off of that government dollar, all of that is going to be highly educated, highly paid, largely, I said, heavily white, let's say, in those industries, which means they're podcast listeners. That's just like the demographics. Particularly, they're going to be listening to politics podcasts a lot, but they're also going to be listening to comedy podcasts to come down off of that. And then the storytelling podcasts like the NPR stuff, we know that audience likes a lot too. Same thing with Seattle, Tacoma. That's a very artsy city. It's like heavily into the storytelling, I think. They've got a very public radio, scene there. I think that's totally makes sense. Salt Lake, the one that's on here that's surprising to me, honestly, is Nashville. I think of Nashville as such a music town, both for country, obviously, but also it's a great rock and roll town too. I just feel like more people would be listening to the radio and to streaming music or something there. I can't imagine that they're up to 42%, almost 42% of the people in the city have listened to podcasts. But again, it's a very urban, young, hip.
It's a fast-growing
upwardly
city.
Mobile. Yeah. So again, if that's the thing that all of these cities have in common is they're very upwardly mobile. They're younger, demographically speaking. They're generally high-paying tech jobs and other businesses like that. So I think the list makes sense when you think about it like that. I will say, as a guy who comes from radio, I think the portable people meter is nonsense. I think it's only slightly better than the journal that we used to fill out, like the little diary, because everybody watched hours and hours of PBS and nobody ever watched Maury Povich when you did the Nielsen TV ratings, So I think people misreport, and I don't know how much they carry these little boxes around. As you said, they used to be very large and unwieldy. But I don't know. I think people also were excited to be part of the rating system, and they're excited to be a Nielsen family or whatever. So maybe they do take it very seriously. I know the one time that I got to do TV, I was jacked up to get my little book and to keep my diary of everything that I watched. And I was diligent about doing so honestly. Although I also made a point to watch all the shows that I really liked that week live, whereas I don't always do that. But I was like, I got to write them down. I got to do it. Anyway, so take this all with a grain of salt.
I always wanted to do it. And then the one time that I was asked to be a Nielsen family, I worked at ESPN, and I was thus disqualified from working. Washington, D.C., by the way, the number 7 media town, according to Nielsen. Seattle is number 14. And I'm trying to look for some of these other ones that Nashville, 29. And I really want that New Jersey one. Where are they? They have to be way, way down here. They're not even in the top 100. At least I didn't see them in a quick glimpse. Oh, well. Anyway,
I'm glad you were here to give us the geography on that one, by the way, because I had no clue where Middlesex, Somerset, Union was. Never heard of that one.
New Jersey.
All right, then. Interesting to me. And I do think that it is a Well, it just confirms what we already thought we know about the demographics of podcasting, I think, in general, Jay. That's what I took away from that.
Yeah, if it's percentage, I sort of see it now. But even at a percentage, I still think that there's a higher percentage listening in New York and LA that they didn't make the top 10. That's just odd to me. But anyway, that's why we question these things. That's why we put it out there. We
Indeed.
Always ask why. When it comes to anything, just ask why, and you'll find an answer you probably don't want to find.
Jay, let's talk about Art19 and Google Podcasts. This is from Podnews. Why would anyone not want to be on Google Podcasts, Jay?
Yeah, I don't understand this at all. So Art19 apparently has made a number of updates to their service, including one that allows publishers to block their podcast from appearing in Google Podcasts. According to what James Cridlin, who is the writer of the Podnews and the editor, we spoke with a few publishers at Podcast Day, and it sounds like some want to remove podcast play buttons from appearing within Google search while still allowing them in Google Podcasts itself. This option, however, would entirely remove podcasts from all Google products. And I don't quite understand why they wouldn't want to be part of Google Podcasts unless it's about controlling the information that you're getting about that audience member and they're only clicking play on your website.
The second line, the second group there, we spoke with a few publishers at Podcast Day, and it sounds like some want to remove podcast play buttons from appearing within search while still allowing them in Google Podcasts itself. I think that is probably the point for most of these publishers, and I this is a guess, this is an assumption on my part, but I would imagine, because I've heard it from some independent podcasters as well, they say, okay, it's cool, Google's going to put play buttons in Google search results. That's awesome. Except that, isn't the point to drive them to our website? Don't you guys always say, make your landing page your website, my.com, mydomain.com/podcast, and everybody goes there, and then all of the things that I want people to do potentially with my show are there. They can play it, they can subscribe to it, they can listen to it on all the different apps, they can sign up for my newsletter, they can join my Patreon, they can send me PayPal dollars if they want to, whatever. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? If that's what we're supposed to do, drive them to your domain, well, then why do I want them to hit a play button right there in Google search results and never even go to my content? We were talking earlier off air, Jay, about Spotify moving to the episodes in playlists of podcasts, not pushing a whole show on you, but saying, hey, here's an episode of this, and then here's an episode of something different that has a theme maybe or that flows. And do we want them to be moving from content to content, or do we want to try to maintain the connection directly? I think that might be the answer.
I would tell people you want to have a circular symbiotic relationship where, yes, in a perfect blue sky world, you want to push all of your audience to your own website so that you can control to a degree their listening experience. However, if they discover you from Google, then you want to have the ability to push them from Google back to your website so that it's a symbiotic sort of circular relationship. You never want to push them to just one place without knowing that the other place exists. You want to push them to that one place. The main reason why you're pushing them to your website is because that's the easiest way to market your show. Like you don't have to worry about, do I promote a Google link? Do I promote an Apple link? Do I promote a Spotify link? You push them to your website. They can choose which service serves them best in terms of a subscription, which is ultimately also what you want. You want them to automatically download your show without having to let them know, hey, a new episode's available, go get it. You just want them to one day turn on their device and, oh, boom, there's the newest episode of Always Listening. Fantastic. I've got it. I don't have to worry about checking out the Twitter feeds of Joel or Jay or the Facebook page of Always Listening Pod. I don't have to worry about any of that. It's right there. Boom. I've got it. So you just want to make sure that it's circular. So again, I get it. Like if they found your podcast, they did a Google search, they found your podcast, they clicked the play button on Google. Perhaps that's not the best way to get that information. But again, the only place that that's going to be a disservice to you and again, if you're a larger publisher, I can see this, is that you're not going to get all that juicy information about who that person specifically is, where that person is specifically located, because all of that information goes back to the advertisers that you can then say, hey, this is my audience. This is whom you're targeting. This is who should be getting these ads. I also bring that up.
Well, you could also retarget them. You could retarget them, Jay, as the media publisher, right? If you're the New York Times and you come to my website once, I can then put Facebook ads and Twitter ads and an Instagram ad so that you're reminded, hey, you should come back and listen to more of that podcast that you like from the New York Times website. I can't do that if you just hit my play button in Google.
Now, I also bring that up because I'm not sure if it's related. It probably isn't, but I bring it up anyway. Because I recently learned that while Blueberry is IAB certified, not every service that they report stats from are IAB certified, such as Spotify. So the stats that you get from Blueberry are presented as separate. You have the Blueberry IAB certified listens, and then you have Spotify listens, which are not IAB certified. Very important distinction there. So the listens that you're getting from Spotify do not follow the constructs set out, the standards set out by the IAB. And while Blueberry presents this as two different types of listening, although very underreported that Spotify was not IAB certified, and while they're giving that number to you in your Blueberry host, you're not necessarily making that distinction like, oh, well, while I'm getting Spotify stats separated out of my total listens, these aren't the IAB, they're not IAB certified. You're not making that distinction. So it's gone a little bit underreported there. There are other services, such as the one that I use, where Spotify is not broken out as a separate listening spot. And thus, I'm really not making the distinction that the Spotify stats are not IAB certified.
I mean, that makes you wonder because, and we've talked about this on the show as well, Spreaker, the platform that we're both talking about, you and I both host with Spreaker, they monetize their plays through Spotify as well now too. They pass through the advertisement, the dynamic ad insertion. How are they doing that if there's no certification? Makes you wonder how those agreements work. I don't know, man. Like that one's
it's interesting.
We need standardization. We need one thing for all the companies.
And everybody's got to get on board. And if they're not going to get on board, because as Todd has said in talking with ad buyers, oh, well, they're close enough. Well, it turned out Podtrack's numbers weren't close enough. So why are we to believe that Spotify's numbers are going to be close enough, or that anyone else's numbers are going to be close enough? Now, I will give Spotify one minor pass, very minor, not to be overblown. Spotify is a streaming company versus a download. And I'm not 100% sure if the IAB standards are set to streaming services as well as download services. So that would be the only possible distinction.
I do understand that there is a difference, but realistically, when we are talking about the fact that almost every device uses progressive downloads and streaming itself is just progressively downloading, I cannot believe that the tech is so different there that we couldn't apply standards that fit across both. I do
agree.
not buy that.
I agree.
I do not think that can be true. I mean, that might be the argument that we get eventually is, oh, the reason we don't have to do that is because streaming is different and we don't have the tech to count it properly yet. I say that's hooey if that's what we get eventually. So, Jay, let's go ahead and wrap it up for today, and let's talk about our currently listening podcasts. I'm going to start because I've been really excited about this show for a long time, and this week I finally got to sit down and watch the 3 episodes that are available right now. I am a huge fan of Swamp Thing. We've talked about comic book movies a lot on this show. You guys know I'm a comic book geek from when I was a kid. But Swamp Thing is one of my favorites, man. I enjoyed the comics when I was a kid. I watched both the movies that came out in the 80s, the schlocky, terrible movies. Both of them were really bad, but wonderful in their own way. And then especially there was a 90s TV series that was like sort of a sequel to the second movie. And for me anyway, it ran on USA. I think it was just in syndication. I don't think it was made by a network, but I watched it on the USA Network. And it was just like central to that period of my youth. I don't know, from like 6 to 10, I was just a huge Swamp Thing fan. I really was. So when the DC Universe, their streaming network, announced that there was going to be a Swamp Thing series in their first batch of original series, there's like Doom Patrol, and they did Teen Titans, and I think they just call it Titans because they're not teens anymore. They're all a little grown up in that series. They say the F word and things. So there's Titans, there's Doom Patrol, and now there's Swamp Thing. Just premiered at the end of May. The sad news is that the series got canceled before it ever started, really. It was supposed to be 13 episodes. They only made 10 because it was very expensive, and there was a disagreement in the tax breaks, apparently, or some of the things that they were supposed to get, the tax incentives. Like, it ended up costing the network like $40 or $50 million more than they thought they were going to spend on it because they misunderstood the tax breaks. So it got canceled. Very likely that this 10-episode series is all we're ever going to get, but I am soaking it up. The first 3 episodes are out right now on the streaming service. They're great, and I've been listening to a companion show called Swamp Thing Radio. 2 ladies host it, Carolyn and what is her name? Wendy, I want to say. Yeah, I think it's Carolyn and Wendy, and they are part of a larger network that is all about the entire DC streaming service. It's DC TV Radio, I think, is what it's called. There's several podcasts, but these 2 ladies host one about Swamp Thing. They both, like me, are lifelong Swamp Thing fans. They've done episodes about the movies. They've done episodes about the old TV series. They've done episodes about the Alan Moore run of the comic books, and now they're doing individual episodes about the TV show as well as it comes out. So check it out, Swamp Thing Radio, and the link is in the show notes.
Well, I'll tell you something that I've been listening to here, Joel, this last week. Crime Stories with Nancy Grace.
Oh, my.
Yeah. You know, I decided to jump into this true crime stuff and give some true crime stuff a listen. And Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. Now, what's interesting about her show is it sounds very much like it was produced for television. But it's not. It's the podcast. And so I highly recommend it. She goes through a whole litany of different crimes. It's not just, murders, but there's kidnappings, there's bank robberies, there's all sorts of different crime stories, all presented by Nancy Grace. It's a very good listen. It's quick, it's easy. Her longest episodes, I think, are, maybe 40 minutes. And she even does a Crime Alert series, which is only a minute long. I believe that is syndicated on radio. That if you just want a quick little, crime story, in your life, just a little morsel, just a little taste. There's a 1-minute version of what she's doing as well. So Crime Stories with Nancy Grace, highly recommended.
Interesting. Jay, she had kidnapped that girl. Oh my goodness. That's all I can think about is Nancy is being so perplexed by what has happened.
She does have a very thick Southern accent.
I kind of like it, though. I was, anytime, as a Southerner myself, as a good old country boy myself, anytime that someone ascends to a high level of national fame while maintaining a very thick Southern accent, I am Matthew McConaughey, for instance. Big fan of Matthews. All right. All right, Jay, let's wrap up this show, whether we have Southern heritage or not, with Grace, Nancy Grace.
Well done.
Tell them where you can find you on Twitter.
I am at The Real Podvader on Twitter. Facebook.com/Podvader page. For Facebook, you can email me nextfanup@gmail.com. Really would love to get some feedback to hear what you're missing from our show. I'll bet you today you're not going to find a lot missing. You're probably going to have more questions than we have answers for. But I will tell you one thing. Just like Nancy Grace, I will find the answers.
I have a particular set of skills.
Yes.
I will find you. My name is Joel Sharpton. You can find me on Twitter at The Rogues Life. You can find me everywhere else at propodcastingservices.com. And you can find us here and every week, alwayslisteningpod.com. Until next week, I'm Joel.
I'm Jay, not of Southern heritage, but still #1 dad.
And we are always listening.
Yeah, I know I ain't seen it all, but I've seen enough. Yeah, I know I ain't seen it all, but I've seen enough.
Always Listening is a proud member of the Two Guys and a Rogue network. You can find all of our past episodes, including more than 100 podcast reviews, at alwayslisteningpod.com in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. For help on your podcast, visit propodcastingservices.com. Our theme song is Enough from Bethany Rayburn.
When that day comes and I stop breathing, will you bury me with my love? Will you bury me with my love? 'Cause if I never thought twice about dying, then this ain't no life at all. Honey, it ain't no life at all. Yeah, I know I ain't seen it all, but I've seen enough. Yeah, I know I ain't seen it all, but I've seen enough. Yeah, I know I ain't seen it all, but I've seen enough. Yeah, I know I ain't seen it all, but I've had enough.
Two Guys and a Rogue.
I'm one guy,
I'm the other.
and this is the network.